Nambi had always been the picture of success, tall, handsome, and commanding. His businesses sprawled across Lagos, and his name was synonymous with wealth and influence. Yet, as he sat in the doctor's office the humid afternoon, none of it mattered. The doctor's voice was steady, but the words were fatal. You have a terminal illness. The tests show advanced stages. You only have a short time left. Nambi's vision blurred. He struggled to breathe, as though the very air had betrayed him. His fiancée, Kayamika, clutched his hand with trembling fingers. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks, and she whispered, "God forbid, no, not you." Outwardly, she looked broken, but inside her thoughts swirled. What will become of me if he dies? Where will I stand when his empire crumbles? That night, Nambi returned home and made a choice. He would not waste his final days in hospitals. He would forego treatment and instead spend his time with family and loved ones, cherishing each moment. But love, he would soon learn, was a fragile thing. At first, Kayamika stayed close to Nambi, cooking his meals, sitting by his side, and singing softly to ease his restless nights. But her affection soon waned. His once strong figure was now overshadowed by frailty. His laughter had dimmed, his presence subdued. In his absence, Obinna, Nambi's best friend since childhood, became a frequent visitor. He came often to encourage Nambi, bringing laughter and companionship. But when Nambi dozed, Kayamika's eyes lingered too long on Obinna. She admired his strength, the way he carried himself, the familiarity he had with her home. One evening, Obinna found Kayamika crying in the kitchen. She leaned into him, sobbing, "I can't bear to see him this way." He wrapped his arms around her to comfort her, and in that embrace, a dangerous spark was ignited. From whispers in dark corners to stolen kisses, their affair blossomed. At first, guilt plagued Kayamika, but the more she tasted the forbidden fruit, the easier it became to betray. Namdi, believing his end was near, began giving away assets and writing his will. Meanwhile, Kayamika and Obinna sealed their betrayal. In a quiet, hastily arranged ceremony, they exchanged vows. There was no celebration, no music, no witnesses apart from two strangers to sign as witnesses. But to Kayamika, it was security. To Obinna, it was possession. And to Namdi, it was unthinkable. He sat in his mansion, frail and pale, completely unaware that the woman he loved had become another man's wife. The irony of fate revealed itself with merciless cruelty. Days after the wedding, Obinna collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital, and doctors ran urgent tests. When the results came, everyone was stunned. The reports that had doomed Namdi had been mistakenly swapped. Obinna, not Namdi, carried the chronic illness. And worse, the treatment would render him infertile. Namdi wept with gratitude at his unexpected second chance. But even as relief washed over him, his joy was poisoned by betrayal. So this was her plan, he thought bitterly, to secure her future without me. The tables had turned, and now it was Obinna who carried the weight of mortality. Nambi struggled with his new reality. His body was alive, but his heart was wounded beyond measure. Every time he saw Kayamika, memories of her laughter and kisses cut him deeply. Kayamika, on the other hand, was furious with fate. Obinna, the man she thought would secure her future, had become a burden. She watched him shrink into weakness, his once powerful arms trembling as he struggled to walk. "What kind of life is this?" she muttered to herself in the privacy of her room. Her love for Obinna had withered into resentment. She felt trapped by his illness, by her choices, by her own greed. The days grew darker for Obinna and Kayamika. The home they shared was filled with bitterness. Obinna longed for affection, but Kayamika recoiled from his touch. Loneliness drove her back to Namdi. In secret, she began visiting him. They would sit in his car or in hidden corners of hotels, their meetings filled with heavy silence. "Why do you still come to me?" Nambi once asked, his voice laced with both longing and pain. "Because I still love you," she whispered. But in her eyes, he saw no love, only desperation. Obina noticed the distance, the late nights, the secretive phone calls. His instincts told him the truth. One evening, he confronted her, his voice weak but edged with fury. "Are you still seeing him, Kayamika? My best friend?" She tried to explain. "Obina, please, you don't understand." "Don't," he snapped, coughing violently. "You betrayed me. You betrayed him. Was I just your stepping stone? Was that all I was to you?" The stress overwhelmed him. His body shook, his breathing labored. Within minutes, he collapsed into her arms. Rushed to the hospital, Obina slipped into a coma. Machines beeped rhythmically, keeping his fragile body alive. Kayamika sat by his bed, her hands trembling as she stared at the man she once desired. Guilt clawed at her, but so did impatience. She wanted freedom, not chains. Nambi visited too. Standing by his friend's bedside, he fought back tears. "We were brothers," he whispered. "How'd it come to this?" Days turned into weeks, but Obina never woke. One morning, the monitor's steady rhythm flatlined. Silence filled the room. Obina was gone. The days after Obina's burial were heavy with silence. Lagos bustled as usual, but for Kayamika the city felt like a desert, empty and hostile. She avoided people's eyes at the funeral, ashamed of the whispers. Some pitied her, others judged her. When the last handful of red soil covered Obina's grave, Kayamika felt an unbearable void. The man she had gambled her life for was gone, and with him, the security she thought she had secured. 2 nights later, dressed in a simple wrapper with no makeup, she appeared at Namdi's gate. The guards hesitated, but her tear-streaked face convinced them to let her in. Namdi was in his study, surrounded by stacks of paperwork. The glow of a lamp cast shadows on his tired face. When she entered, he froze, his pen dropping onto the desk. "Namdi," she whispered, her voice trembling. His eyes hardened. "Why are you here?" Kayamika fell to her knees. Her pride shattered as she clutched at his legs. "Please forgive me. I made terrible mistakes. But we can start over. You are alive, Namdi. We still have a chance." Her sobs echoed in the room, and for a moment, Namdi's heart wavered. Memories of their laughter, of the dreams they once shared, tugged at him. But then, visions of her betrayal, of her in Obina's arms, stabbed deeper. "Kayamika," he said slowly, "what you broke cannot be repaired with tears." Still, she pressed on. "I love you. I always did. I was afraid. I was foolish. Give me another chance, I beg you." The room was thick with tension, and even the walls seemed to hold their breath, waiting for his reply. Nambi stood, pulling his chair back sharply. The sound made Kayamika flinch. He paced the room, his hands clenched behind his back, his mind a battlefield between anger and pity. Finally, he turned to face her. "Do you even hear yourself? You left me when I was at my lowest. You ran into the arms of the man I call brother. And now that he is gone, you crawl back to me." Kayamika's tears streamed down her face. She reached for him again. "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that," he cut in sharply. His voice carried the weight of months of betrayal. "You loved my wealth, not me. You wanted security, not love. And in the process, you destroyed 2 men." She shook her head violently. No, Nambi, please. I swear I still love you. I made mistakes, but we can heal. We can rebuild everything." Nambi's expression softened for the briefest second, but then it hardened again. "You cannot rebuild trust once it has been burned to ash. I looked at you once and saw a future. Now I look at you and see betrayal." He walked to the door and opened it. "Leave my house, Kayamika. Tonight and forever." Her chest tightened as though a blade had been driven through it. She clung to the floor, refusing to move. "Namdi, don't do this to me. Don't send me away." His voice dropped, quiet but cold. "You already sent yourself away the day you chose Obina over me. Leave." And with that, he turned his back on her. The door shut behind her with a hollow thud that seemed to echo inside her very soul. Kayamika staggered into the night, the street lights casting long, mocking shadows across her path. Her once glittering world had crumbled. She returned to her apartment, filled with the luxury she once craved, Gold jewelry in glass cases, perfumes lined neatly, designer gowns hanging like trophies. But none of them offered comfort. The silence of the empty room was suffocating. She sank onto the floor, hugging herself tightly. Memories assaulted her. Namdi's warm smile when he first proposed, the steady strength of Obina's arms, the reckless nights of passion, the moment she said, "I do," to the wrong man. Every choice replayed like a haunting film. She looked into the mirror across the room. The reflection staring back was not the glamorous fiancé of Lagos's most eligible bachelor. It was a hollow woman with swollen eyes, mascara-streaked cheeks, and trembling lips. "Look at you," she whispered bitterly to herself. "You had everything, and you threw it away." Her sobs filled the empty apartment until dawn. For the first time, Kayamika understood the true weight of loneliness. Wealth without love was emptiness. Security without trust was prison. And regret, sharper than any knife, was her only companion. The weeks after Kayamika's departure were heavy, but strangely liberating for Namdi. For the first time in months, he could breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing on his chest. Each morning, he rose early and stood by the balcony of his mansion, watching the sunrise creep over Lagos. The city roared with life, cars honking, traders shouting, children laughing on their way to school. For Namdi, each sound was a reminder that life had given him another chance. He threw himself into his businesses again, but this time with a different heart. Money no longer meant power to him. It meant opportunity. He began sponsoring scholarships for young students, funding hospitals in rural communities, and donating to cancer research in Obina's name. One evening, standing before a crowd at a charity gala, he spoke with quiet conviction. Wealth means nothing without purpose. And trust, once lost, cannot be bought back with gold. I stand here today not as a man who has everything, but as a man who has learned the value of love, loyalty, and true friendship. The hall erupted in applause, but in his heart, the words were a eulogy, not only for Obina, but for the friendship and love he had lost. Meanwhile, Kayamika's world grew darker. She tried to return to the social circles she once dominated, but the whispers followed her everywhere. "That's the woman who betrayed Namdi, the widow of Obina, the one who lost both." Men who once admired her now avoided her. Friends who once envied her now pitted her. The jewelry on her neck felt heavy, the gowns in her wardrobe like costumes for a role she could no longer play. One night, she sat in her apartment staring at her phone, scrolling through old photos. There was Namdi, smiling with his arm around her. There was Obina, raising a glass in celebration. The faces of two men who had given her everything, yet whom she had destroyed with her own hands. Her tears fell onto the phone screen. "I had love," she whispered. "I had trust, and I sold them for nothing." Loneliness became her shadow. Regret, her only companion. For Namdi, the pain did not vanish overnight. But with each passing day, he grew stronger. He forgave, not because Kayamika asked for it, but because holding on to bitterness would have poisoned the second chance life had granted him. For Kayamika, there was no such redemption. She lived on, haunted by the truth that the wealth she had pursued so desperately was meaningless without love. And so, their lives diverged, one rising into light, the other sinking into shadows.